Hey, it's Hunter with Lone Star Woodworking, and in this video, I'm going to take this 700-year-old slab of old-growth redwood burl and make a desk for my wife with some pretty cool technology that you've seen me use before for her paint room where she creates and hangs her artwork. Now, if you've watched my channel for any length of time, you know that this isn't the first time I have made my wife a desk, and you know it's not the first time I've used those technology grommets. The first desk that I made her was from some Claro walnut cluster burl, and it looked absolutely gorgeous, so I'm kind of upset with how I butchered it. There were a bunch of design aspects that should have been looked at a little bit more critically that just weren't. And I took a lot of creative freedom with it and didn't do my wife the justice of consulting her on how she wanted her desk to look before I did something. So she didn't like where I put the technology grommet. She didn't like where I put the wire management grommets. And I can't really blame her. In the end, it did look kind of goofy. In fact, if you go back and watch that video at the very end, it looked like Cookie Monster. It was kind of goofy looking. So my wife said that, like, well, hey, you know, I may not like all of it, but it is still a pretty desk. Let's just get everything set up in my area so that we can bring it inside. Well, life happens, and it took us a really long time to even start that process. So during that time, it was just kind of sitting in the garage, taking up a little bit of space. And it just so happened that within this time, my in-laws had moved in right up the road from us in my neighborhood. And my brother-in-law needed a desk for his monitors and his computer and stuff because he likes to game and he likes to, I think he likes to watch movies on his computer, whatever. He just needed a desk to put all of his stuff on. And the fact that it had that technology grommet in there would work out perfectly for him. So we gave it to him. And that's what happened to that. And we weren't too torn up about it because, again, neither one of us were super stoked about how that desk looked. And it was taking us a really long time to get to making all these spaces look the way we wanted to. But fast forward a few months, and my wife and I come to the conclusion that what was supposed to be our starter home is looking more like our forever home, which I think is the case with a good portion of people in my generation and in my age group. So we've been working on making a lot of the rooms more of a livable space for us. We're trying to make it more homey and not just a space that happens to be inside of our home. And part of that was her setting up her whole room where she likes to paint. And she was getting it all set up, and she eventually came up to me and said, hey, I'm ready for another desk. But please, let's not make the same mistakes as last time. And of course, I agreed. So I started looking up a bunch of different options for us and eventually landed on this old growth redwood from Cali Hardwood and Supplies. I've mentioned him a bunch of times along with Tahoe Slab Furniture. Every single one of those guys, Derek and Colin, they are fantastic to work with. I can't say enough good things about either one of them. This one happened to come from Cali Hardwood and Supplies, and I actually ordered a different one, but he's in the middle of a big shop move, so good for him. And in the middle of that move, it looks like someone actually managed to break into his lumberyard and steal that slab, so that kind of sucked, but he did offer to send me a different one that was bigger, had a little bit more figure in it for the same price, which I think in the end was $400. So pretty good. And I said, yep, sure, no problem. And he sent it over. And that is where we started this entire video, is me unboxing it, putting a layout together for my wife, having her give me her opinion on it, and moving forward with building the form, which is never a super fun thing to watch, which is why I kind of gloss over it. Now we're going to be filling in these cracks with some purple epoxy, which we all know I'm not a super huge fan of. Initially, I jumped on the black epoxy bandwagon because that's what Blacktail Studio was doing, and of course he's selling furniture worth tens of thousands of dollars. But eventually it evolved as I learned more about how epoxy works to it's easy to fix. Whereas if I pour the epoxy just a little too deep, because again, I'm in an unair conditioned garage in the middle of Southeast Texas, like it gets hot down here. And if you didn't know, epoxy will flash cure or cure too quickly with more heat. So if you pour it too thick, then it could actually flash cure to the point where it cracks and it splits. And it's a very defeating thing to walk out and see the very next morning. Luckily, Magic Resin has been working on their 4-inch formula and improving it. So I've made some pretty ridiculous pours with some deep pour epoxy with some pretty ridiculous heat, and it's actually performed just fine. These slabs were 2 3/4 of an inch thick, so almost a 3-inch pour and no cracks, no issues, nothing negative to say about it at all. So that was fantastic. And I also didn't expect to only need 3 gallons. I actually ordered a 6-gallon kit because I thought I might need all of that for how thick these slabs were. Now, if you're wondering why, when everything was cured, I only busted off the sides of the form, it's just so when I take it over to Jason at Crafts Logworks, he has that perfectly flat reference surface from the plywood to flatten that top side before we busted off and flatten the bottom. And it went, like popping off the bottom went just as well as popping off the sides. It was super easy. Packing tape works fantastically. And if you keep having issues with form release or paste wax, I highly recommend just go with tape, and you don't got to use the expensive tuck tape because that stuff is ridiculously expensive. I understand why, because it's not designed for making forms for epoxy, but it's just ridiculously expensive. Packing tape works just fine. Now, I mentioned in one of my earlier videos that I definitely choose some weird times to sand, because if you're new to this, or maybe if you even do this often enough, you might be looking at this and wondering why the hell I'm sanding right here after it had just gotten flattened. Why am I not going directly into squaring it up? Which I guess I really could have, but at the time, that's just not where my head was at. So I wanted to sand off all of the planer lines, so that way I could see if there were going to be any major issues on the top that I needed to fix. But on top of that, what I'm about to do here is put an epoxy base coat in order to just kind of harden up this softwood, and it's a cookie, so I didn't want a ton of finish to get absorbed down into the end grain, so this kind of helps seal it off and prevents me having to use a bunch of finish. But another effect of this is if you leave the planer lines on there and you put that epoxy base coat, I've actually had it to where it just becomes permanent. Like no amount of sanding will get it out, and it's incredibly frustrating. So I sand off those lines so that way when I put this epoxy base coat on, I don't run into that issue. Now, this epoxy base coat is just tabletop epoxy. Again, this is a crosscut or a cookie, so it's going to be super absorbent no matter what. All I did was take some tabletop epoxy, add about 10 to 15% of acetone, so that way it thins it out to basically water viscosity, and it soaks it in like nobody's business, as you can see here. And then as I put on or roll on a different layer, I hit it with the torch. It kind of thins out that epoxy even more and allows it to absorb more into the wood. Now, you can use your deep pour epoxy for that if you want. This is just a really good alternative, but here's why you need to be kind of careful with it. Be careful with the ratio that you put of acetone, because I just told you that you only need to put 10 to 15% the total volume of what you're using in order to thin it out properly. I added a lot of acetone to one of my batches, and you saw that everything kind of gums up. You see all those snowflakes as I'm sanding, and that's just from totally uncured epoxy. It's just still gummy and kind of rubbery. It's cured enough to sand, it's just not hard. So be careful with that if you choose to go this route. Now with that base coat mostly sanded off, or at least having all the high spots sanded off and left with nothing but just stabilized hardened wood, Moving on to the little imperfections that I just kind of expected to be a normal part of working with a burl and a cookie. Really, there weren't that many. I was pleasantly surprised at how few there were, because if you've worked with any of these types of projects before, you know that inevitably you're going to get these stupid little pinholes that are incredibly difficult to fill. They're so tiny that they won't let the air in for it to be filled. But luckily, you just have to dig them out a little bit and then they fill no problem. So y'all, we're about halfway through this video and you haven't even seen a whole lot of interesting stuff yet. So if you've made it this far, I greatly applaud your attention span and your ability to stick with it. And if you've made it this far, I think you should consider subscribing, because I do this a lot. This is my bread and butter. It's not something that I do in every video, but it is something I do more often than not. And if you'd like to see more videos of a guy who's just trying to do his best in a air-conditioned 2-car garage in the middle of Southeast Texas during the summer months, then, I mean, hey, you can't get much better than me. But also 5 Duck Studio, he's pretty cool too. But he's a lot more educational than I am. I just kind of try to show y'all cool stuff. I'm not quite experienced enough to think I have the ability to teach you to do anything. But if my humbleness impresses you, I think you should consider subscribing. But a comment, a like, a share, all of that is appreciated nonetheless. Now, this is an unfortunate part of working with these slabs that just have a bunch of like cavernous areas. The epoxy only was able to fill up to a certain point, and eventually it just trapped that air in there and it wasn't going to go anywhere. This set me back by a day, which I was kind of frustrated by, because I was anticipating finishing this day. And it's like a tease. It makes you more mad than anything, but you also understand that it's necessary. So you just kind of bear it down. And I didn't feel like sanding all of this, so I just took the track saw and moved it over incrementally. That edge is just slightly off compared to all the other ones, but I don't think you can tell. Speaking of that edge profile, you saw me mention it whenever I redid my mappa table, and I'm so happy that I got to actually put this design into practice, because I have been wanting to do something with this kind of gem shape ever since I did that. And in that video, I tell you that my wife came out just a little too late to give me this really good idea of only putting a shallow chamfer on the top and the bottom and giving it that truly like cut gem look. And I had already put a deep chamfer on the bottom, so it was too little too late on that one. So I was really happy that I actually get to test that out right here. And that's what you see me adding here, is a shallow-ish chamfer. I say shallow-ish because this is still a very thick table. It's still 2.5 inches thick. So this chamfer, I think, is 3/4 of an inch, which would be pretty big on any other tabletop, but because this one's so thick, it's no problem. Now, the last desk that I built my wife had this exact same leg assembly, this sit stand leg assembly. It's called Ergear, Ergear. I have no complaints about that. They worked perfectly. They're super cheap off of Amazon, a little bit over $100. There was someone that commented on that video saying that I should be concerned about how sturdy it could be because that single motor just doesn't have the ass to push up this heavy tabletop, and they were wrong. It's performed just fine. And so given that this redwood is a little bit lighter than that walnut, despite being almost twice as thick, I really wasn't that concerned about it. And I'm just attaching it with my normal method of using threaded inserts and some 1/4-20 bolts. I unfortunately didn't get the part where I actually attached threaded inserts, but chances are if you found my video, you've probably watched someone who's much more experienced at this than I am do it a million other times. and it attached. It looked really good. It was nice and sturdy. So with that, I took all that off and flipped over to the top and put the little chamfer on right here. Now, it's important that I put this chamfer here because I'm about to start adding the wire management grommets and the technology grommet. And if I tried to put the wire management grommet on first, there might have been a chance that I would have put it too close to the edge and I would have run that chamfer directly into them. So I put that chamfer on, measured out the rough center of this slab, and then brought my wife out to tell me exactly where she wanted it, how close she wanted them, how wide she wanted them, where exactly she wanted them, so that she got exactly what she wanted. Because like I said, I didn't do such a great job of that last time. Now I'll show you here in a minute how I actually solved this problem, because you can't see it too easily there, but that hole saw is actually bottoming out. It's not going all the way through the slab. But I'll show you how I got around that. But here's what I had to do for this technology grommet. I had to put the legs on the top roughly where they would be so that we didn't drill the technology grommet's hole in the way of any of that leg assembly. So we figured out where we wanted it, and here I'm going to drill roughly halfway through the slab. You see it bottomed out there and it won't go all the way through. Use a Bradley bit, go all the way through, give myself a pilot hole, and just go up from the bottom. Nice and easy. You've seen people do that 1,000 times, and it actually prevents tear out, so this was more or less a blessing in disguise. Now I'm going to use a few different bits here in order to hog out this hole, and maybe there's an easier way to do this, but I couldn't think of one in the moment. I have this 3-inch circle jig and a really big 3/4 inch patterning bit that I'm using to hog out most of the material and give myself a nice flat reference surface for the flush trim bit to ride on. And that's what you see me chucking up right here. And I'm so sorry about this camera quality. I tried to zoom in on my camera and it just didn't turn out too good. And I didn't see it until I started editing, so my bad. But that is a 1/2-inch spiral compression bit from Bits and Bits. It's a really nice bit, and it ate through that redwood with absolutely no issues. Now this technology grommet has some threads on it, and it's got a little nut that goes around it and secures it to whatever surface you happen to be attaching it to. So I need to use this rabbiting bit and just kind of clear out a space for that nut to spin on. Didn't really have an idea for how far down I had to go. I just went about halfway down and called it good. Now it's a total accident how nicely this fit, but it's a happy accident. This looks really good. I can't ask for much better than that. And now I'm just sanding the bottom up to, I think, 220 or maybe even as low as 180 because that's what the finish I'm going to be using recommends. Now I'm not going to be using Rubio Monocoat on this like I usually do. I just haven't been impressed with Rubio Monocoat as much as I used to be. It just doesn't seem like the formula is improving in noticeable ways. Maybe it's because I'm just ignorant to the process and how hard wax oils work. Maybe it's because I'm not paying close enough attention, but I wanted to try something new. So this is sample 73. This is 4 Eyes Furniture's new finish. And so far, nothing particularly remarkable about it. The most remarkable thing about this finish is the fact that the containers allow you to actually use all of the finish and the hardener. Whereas with something like Rubio Monocoat, you have that little hardener can that is incredibly difficult to get that last usable bit out. This just, it comes in bottles, so it's really, really easy to use absolutely every little bit that you get from that. And it comes in a bigger bottle, so you get more bang for the buck, and I liked that. So overall, nothing terribly remarkable yet. It doesn't seem to be too different from any other hard wax oils, but it's performing well. In fact, I even had to spot repair a little bit of this because we dinged it on the way into her painting studio, and I had to do a spot repair, and it worked out just fine. Like it performed just as well as any other hard wax oil, and you can see here the process is more or less the same for removing the excess. You just put on a bunch and then you wipe it all off until you stop feeling any of that friction on your cloth. Now here's where we dinged it and I had to spot fix it, but I didn't film that because I figured that it was just easier to spot fix it and then mention it than actually waste your time having to watch it. It's exactly what you just saw, except I had to sand off a little bit. So we got it in place, and now I'm just putting her wire management grommets in there and her technology grommet, and I absolutely love how this fit. I know that the shot is super grainy, but it fits so well, and it just scratched the right part of the brain to have it fit so tightly. And then mounting the height control, she wanted it on the side. Didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I usually like height control on sit-stand desks in the front where I sit, but this is her desk and it's where she wanted it, so that's where she got it. And she apparently forgot that she's 5 foot because she just kept going. She wanted to see how far it could go up, and it was just fine. So it's got more than enough height for us taller guys. And y'all, that is the end of the video. This is the final product. I took a couple of really nice shots outside because the lighting in her paint studio just really isn't super great. So these shots, this is my favorite shot. You can see all that burling right there in that corner. It just looks absolutely amazing. And the fact that this wood is 700 years old, or round about there, it just absolutely baffles me. If wood could speak, or if these trees could speak, I would love to hear what this tree stories were. So y'all, with that, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something, and I hope to see y'all next time. See ya.